I'm back in Connecticut at Wolff Pottery. It's a hot one. It's been hot all week, and Guy and I have been making red pots, working in red clay. Every time I come here, I am reminded of all of the things that I have learned over the 16 years that I've been coming here. And there are 4 little hacks that I feel every potter should definitely know. Things that I've learned from the master. If you're a potter, if you work with clay, you're probably familiar with this tool, the wire, which is used to cut clay. I learned something so valuable from Guy about how to properly cut off a piece from a bat, from the wheel head, and lift it off. There is the right way of doing this and the wrong way of doing this.
So when the pot is finished being thrown, this is such a cool little thing. There are lots of different ways of talking about that clay has a memory. So just think of it as that they're these platelets of material that are long and thin. So when you do something to them, they move in a particular direction. So we start by this doesn't matter which direction you end up going. But when you cut under a pot, just remember the last place the wire is the place you're going to be picking up from. So if I push it through and it's the farthest point away from me.
So he went from here to there, and the wire came out here.
The last place the wire is right here.
Yep.
So I'm going to put the bat there,
yeah,
and I'm going to lift up
from here,
from that spot.
And that it cannot be done slowly because it has to be done confidently and in one motion. But what if I were to mimic the motion? Guy picked it up from that spot like this and pulled it up this way. And sometimes when we pick it up from there and do a little circular motion like this. But basically, the most important thing is that the tension...
It came up like that. But it can come up like that and do a circle.
Yep. But what you can't do, which is what I have tried to do, is you can't pick it up from here. It just doesn't work.
Because that's where it's closed off.
That's what was amazing. Because I figured, wait, I cut underneath it. Why isn't this working? Because I started from over here trying to lift the pot off and I squished the pot. There's like so the wire leaves and there's more space over here.
There's almost like there's an air space under it from the last spot.
Over here, but over here, that suction is closed now. So
it got closed more here than from there.
Yeah, it got closed more here, and then here it's more open. So It makes sense that you could pick up from here in this direction. And that's something, Guy has just demonstrated that on the wheel head. But I'm often cutting things off of bats, and it's the same. Many of you are probably working on bats, and you have to cut your work off of bats. And if you remember this directional thing, of cutting away, pulling off, you really will save yourself from marring up your piece or morphing your piece into a shape. It really works.
Very simple.
Thank you. This is something that was mentioned 10 years ago, but it took a few years for it to sink in, and now that's all I do. One of these pots is not like the other. Actually, all 3 of these pots are different, which is a no-no. The whole point of me coming here, the whole point of doing it over and over and over again is to learn how to make the pots all the same. Not just because that's an aesthetic goal, but actually how they stack in the kiln is an aspect of making, especially flower pots, because they're not glazed. that is crucial to the form. I have been working around today with figuring out this shape, a shape that goes back to at least 1801 from a historic painting, and this one is just way off. So what happens when you have a piece that's on the bat or on the wheel head and you need to start from scratch and start over again? We do this. We cut the piece off the bat or off the wheeled head, and then this is what I used to do. I used to take the piece, take my clay, where's my little spatula? I used to gather all my clay, and then I used to take this over to the canvas table, and I would start to knead. And I have seen other people, usually students, do this. And what ends up happening is so much of the slop, the wet slop from that freshly made piece, ends up on the canvas. And it just ends up being a mess. Well, Guy showed me how to do something that he learned from someone else, where you do not put it down at all, and you kind of wedge it in the air. So, when I'm doing this in the air, I can often be heard saying aloud to myself, Randoni. Because when Guy first showed me how to do this, it was...
Yeah, so Emanuel Randoni was a folk potter from the southern part of Italy. And he always would take clay. If you take wet material and try to wedge it, it just sticks to the wedging board. But this is... So you're cutting it.
And you're doing it in the air between your hands.
Yep.
And that's slapping the force of your hands going apart and coming together.
So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to be making handles and I wanted the clay to be softer, I might take a little bit of slop and add it to this clay to make it softer.
But you couldn't do that over here.
No,
it would slip all over the place.
It would stick to the... So this is, when you're starting off with clay that's wetter, you know, it's not quite as pretty at the beginning, but...
How old were you when you met Randoni?
24 maybe?
So these nuns here in Connecticut, instead of ordering pots from Italy, ordered a potter who came from Italy.
And taught them how to make flower pots.
And you had the fortune of...
Well, I made the clay for the nuns, and then I got to meet Randoni, and he was just a joy. So now if I was going to be turning this into making candles, I would do that to it so that I could then go on to... But so we just did a batch of wedging.
That's okay.
We just did a batch of wedging without using a wedging board.
Yeah, this is the never left Guy's hands. The Randoni technique. Very useful. Try it out. Sponges. Very often, I see myself doing this. Sponge, water, cleaning like this. And it's so obvious, yet we often don't think of it. The larger the area, the larger the sponge. Have a variety of sponges available to yourself for cleaning up. Large sponge makes cleanup a lot faster.
So the thing that's sort of cool about, as a material, clay will sort of stick where it is. It wants to be there. So the physical way to get a place clean, well, first of all, if I've just finished throwing, so I'm going to start by just getting my hands a little bit cleaner.
And this,
because the whole method was... Now, here's the trick. You look at a spot like this.
Like this?
You need more water. So it seems antithetical.
Yeah,
is that the word?
antithetical.
Antithetical that you would add more water, but you want to get a wholesale thing. Now, I put my dirty water into the dirty water pail.
This is a very interesting setup. Guy has two pails, one with sort of cleaner water, and then this actually has slop. Like as he's throwing and there's bits of clay, he doesn't put it back into his throwing water. He puts it back into the slop bucket. And that's something I've adapted over the years.
But if, when you go and you talk to students, why don't you clean up your wheel? You come back 15 minutes later and they're going, okay. And it's, the point is you can get it clean awfully fast if you
just use a big sponge.
And more water. More water than you think.
These things sound so obvious.
Look here. See, there's a whole batch of clay in here. If you were to try, you scrape at it, you can do all sorts of things. If you just take a huge amount of water and the water will take it away.
Yeah.
So you just want to use more water than you think you need. And it's fast. And you don't leave your tools dirty because the next day they're harder to clean. So a big sponge. And water will get everything off.
This is what I've learned to do from being here. At the end of the day, everything gets wiped off. Everything gets wiped off and put back in its place so that it's ready for the next morning. And you're starting anew.
This isn't really done.
Yeah, and really at the end of the day, even if it's midnight when we finish up, this is what Guy is doing. It's never just sort of left there. Well, there have been a couple of times it's been left there, admittedly. But I have to say,
yes.
part of the thing that has been fascinating, learning these techniques here, this isn't a hobby pottery. This isn't done for leisure where we're making a little thing here and there and then going off to lunch. This is a working shop where everything has to work in order to produce pots in a large scale. And what I've observed over the years has come from necessity. It kind of has to be this way to keep the machine going. But someone at home like you that's maybe doing this for fun or a hobby or thinking to turn it into a business can practice all of these things at home, and it'll just make everything so much more efficient.
So look at this. This surface tomorrow will be wonderful.
Big sponge. Look at that. Like just a few sweeps of the big sponge, and it's tidied up. So you're all done. You finished your work. It's time to go inside. Time to clean up. The last thing that we
ice cream. We're thinking ahead.
Oh yeah,
to
we're
ice
gonna
cream.
go to we're gonna have ice cream.
It's very hot.
Ice cream floats or something. It's 100 degrees outside right now. There's pots drying in the sun.
So let's have a look at the water. We have a pail with completely clean water.
Yeah.
Now, if I put my hands in there, it wouldn't be that. So we happen to have some red clay water here. And so every student in the world will get the clay off their hands, and they think it's done. And, when you think about the winter and why did my hand split? Well, it's because you actually never got the clay off of your skin. Clay is a very, very, very fine particulate of glass. So you could spend 2 hours just going like this, and you're not going to get rid of the clay. You're just not going to get rid of it. So after you do it, the first thing of cleaning up, I really don't have anything colorful there. I'm now going to dunk my arms into this clean water. So now I have this layer of sort of clean water on me. Over here, I have a inexpensive hand cream that I've added some oil to. So this is very wet. And you can see I'm dripping from water. And then I'm taking some heavier oils, a hand cream. And I'm just going to make a wet, we're almost doing the same thing that we were doing with the machinery a second ago. It's the same idea. The wetter it is, the more things are going to move around. But we're using oil that's very, very wet. Now, this is a little wasteful. I know the whole thing about don't waste a tree. But for the potter, if you wick away this oil,
And you can
all of that red clay is coming up in here. It's very, very, very fine.
And that's the last thing you do.
That's the last thing I do. And then because there's oil on this, I might walk over to something like this machine and just throw a little bit of that oil that was from my hand onto the metal. Okay.
And
but I promise you, doing this thing with the oil, you will never have cracked fingers again.
and you really want to get into your fingertips and your cuticles. Like all here. You put it in there, because when you put it in there, the paper towel will pull it out.
It will wick it.
I like to conserve.
Oh yes. Well, you're a better human being. It's just,
No, I don't. I ain't paying for the paper towel, so I feel bad using it. But this has been another thing. I don't come here and we're not throwing for 2 hours every 5 days. It is
all day.
7 days for 6 hours a day of hands in clay in June and in January. And in the wintertime,
it's bad.
My hands would split. And then how am I going to play my harp? So I just wanted to share these things with you because they've become so valuable to me, and they can be applied to anything you're doing with your clay hobby or profession. Thank you, Guy.
You're welcome.